Whatever was wearing her husband's face had stopped pretending to be human. Cecily pressed her spine against the mahogany bedpost as Ambrose Winterbourne's bones began to crack and reshape, his evening coat splitting at the seams, his eyes flooding gold in the candlelight. She'd married him 3 hours ago to gain access to Greymoor's secrets, but the secret staring back at her now had claws and teeth, and the kind of focused hunger that made her heart slam against her ribs for 2 entirely different reasons. "Don't." His voice came out strangled, half growl, as he staggered back from the bed. "Don't move." Cecily's fingers tightened on the bedpost. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but the door was on the other side of him, and he was changing too fast. Fur rippled across his shoulders. His hands, paws, and flexed against the Persian rug. "Ambrose!" She forced his name past the terror in her throat, kept her voice steady the way she'd learned to do when her father's creditors came calling. "Can you hear me?" The wolf that had been her husband went utterly still. For a moment, the only sound was the crack and pop of bones settling into a new shape. He was massive, bigger than any natural wolf had a right to be. Silver-black fur gleaming in the low light, muscles coiled beneath his pelt like steel cables. When he lifted his head, those gold eyes locked onto hers with an intelligence that was purely, terrifyingly human. He took one step toward the bed. Cecily's breath caught, but she didn't look away. Couldn't. Something in his gaze held her pinned more effectively than fear ever could. A pull she had no name for, electric and inevitable, that made her skin feel too tight and her pulse thunder in places she absolutely should not be noticing while staring down a predator. The wolf's ears flicked back. He made a low sound in his chest, not quite a growl, not quite a whine, and then turned and bolted through the open window in an explosion of shattered glass. Cecily stood frozen in the sudden silence, her wedding gown still laced tight enough to make breathing difficult, her hands shaking so badly she had to grip the bedpost to stay upright. She'd known the marriage would be dangerous. She hadn't known it would be impossible. 20 minutes later, Cecily sat in the drawing room with a glass of brandy she hadn't touched, and a housekeeper who wouldn't meet her eyes. "His lordship will return before dawn, my lady." Mrs. Dalloway's voice was flat, practiced, at the tone of a woman who'd delivered this speech before. "He always does. Always." Cecily set the glass down with a sharp click. "How often does this happen, Mrs. Dalloway?" "Every full moon. Sometimes more frequently when he's—" The housekeeper's mouth thinned. Agitated. Agitated. Cecily's laugh felt brittle in her throat. "Is that what we're calling it?" Mrs. Dalloway finally looked at her, and there was something almost like pity in her lined face. "You knew what you were marrying, Lady Winterbourne. His lordship was very clear about the terms." "The terms. Yes." Cecily closed her eyes, hearing Ambrose's voice again in her memory, low and deliberate, standing in her aunt's parlor 3 days ago while rain hammered the windows and her entire world narrowed to a single, impossible choice. "Had your sister vanished on my land," he'd said, not unkindly, simply factual. "The villagers won't talk to an outsider, and the local magistrate is in my pocket. If you want answers, Miss Whitmore, you'll need access to Greymoor. Real access. And you're offering marriage." She'd kept her voice level, even as her stomach twisted. "Why?" "Because I need a wife." He'd moved to the window, his reflection dark against the rain-streaked glass. "And you need something only I can provide. It's transactional. Honest." Honest. She tasted the word, bitter on her tongue. "The entire county calls you a monster, Lord Winterbourne. They say you killed your last fiancé. They're wrong." He'd turned then, his gray eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made the air feel charged. "But not about everything." That should have been her warning, and instead it had sounded like the truth. "You knew," Mrs. Dalloway repeated, softer now. "His lordship gave you a choice, my lady. He always gives a choice." Cecily opened her eyes. "Did he give my sister one?" The housekeeper's expression shuddered. "I don't know what you mean." Louisa Whitmore, 20 years old, auburn hair, a ridiculous optimism about the world. Cecily's voice stayed steady through sheer force of will. She was last seen walking the ridge path above Greymoor's eastern moors 6 weeks ago. The magistrate filed her as a runaway. The villagers won't even speak her name. She leaned forward. But you know something, don't you, Mrs. Dalloway? You've been in this house for 30 years. You know every shadow on this estate. Mrs. Dalloway's hands twisted in her apron. For a moment, and Cecily thought she might actually answer. Then footsteps sounded in the hall, heavy, deliberate, and the housekeeper's face went carefully blank. My lady should rest. It's been a long day. The door opened. Ambrose filled the frame, still in his torn evening clothes, his hair disheveled and damp from the night air. His eyes were gray again. Human. But there was something about the way he moved, fluid and too controlled, that made it impossible to forget what she'd seen. He looked at Mrs. Dalloway. Leave us. The housekeeper fled. Cecily stood, her pulse kicking up despite herself. In the candlelight, she could see scratches healing along his jaw, the torn fabric at his shoulders revealing skin that should have been shredded and wasn't. He watched her take inventory with an expression she couldn't read. You didn't run. His voice was rough, like he'd been screaming or howling. You locked the door from the outside. A muscle ticked in his jaw. You could have broken the window, climbed down the ivy. You're resourceful. I wouldn't have chosen you otherwise. Chosen? The word landed sharp between them. Is that what this is? Yes. He moved into the room, and she hated the way her body responded, hyper-aware of every step that brought him closer, the way the space seemed to contract around his presence. I chose you because you're intelligent, desperate, and brave enough to be dangerous. You chose me because I'm your only path to the truth about your sister. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could smell earth and night air on his skin. Neither of us is here for romance, Lady Winterbourne, but we are here. And now you know exactly what kind of monster I am. Cecily lifted her chin. The rumors said you were a murderer. They were wrong about that. Were they? Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. You don't know what I've done. I know you didn't kill me. She held his gaze. You had every opportunity. Instead, you ran. I had no choice. The bond? He cut himself off, jaw clenching. What bond? For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, the marriage contract you signed wasn't just a legal document. It was a binding ritual, old pack law. He moved to the sideboard, poured himself whiskey with hands that weren't quite steady. It links us, makes separation difficult. How difficult? Painful for both of us. Worse when the moon is full or when I shift. He downed the whiskey in one swallow. I didn't tell you because you wouldn't have believed me, and because I thought I could control it. Can you? No. The word came out flat. Final. Which is why we have rules now, if you're staying. I'm staying. She said it before she could second-guess herself. Until I find Louisa. He turned, his gaze raking over her face like he was searching for a lie. Then listen carefully. You don't leave the estate without my knowledge. You don't go into the East Wing or the cellars. You don't ask the servants about pack business. They won't answer, and it puts them in danger. He set the glass down with a sharp click. And you don't go near the moors alone. Ever. Because that's where Louisa disappeared. Because that's where women disappear. His voice dropped. 3 in the past 6 months. Your sister was just the most recent. The room tilted. Cecily gripped the back of the settee. 3, the magistrate said. The magistrate said what I told him to say. Ambrose's expression was carved from stone. Greymoor's business stays in Greymoor. I can't have human authorities trampling through pack territory, asking questions they're not equipped to understand the answers to. So you buried it. Buried her. I searched for her. The words came out sharp enough to cut. My trackers combed every inch of those moors. We found nothing. No scent trail, no evidence, no body. He took a step toward her, and she saw something raw flicker across his face. I don't know what happened to your sister, Cecily, but I know it wasn't random. And I know whoever took her is still out there. The formal use of her given name sent heat curling down her spine. She shoved it away, focused on what mattered. Who would take them? Rogues? Possibly. Or someone trying to draw me out, force my hand. His jaw worked. I've been absent. From leadership, from the pack. There are those who think I've abandoned my position. Have you? Yes. No hesitation. Because I'm dangerous, Cecily. Because I can't control the shift when the bond pulls or when I'm threatened. Because an alpha king who's a liability to his own people isn't fit to rule. He moved closer, and she could feel the heat radiating off him, see the gold starting to bleed back into his eyes. And because having you here, smelling like you do, feeling what I feel through this damned bond, as it's making everything worse, her breath caught, then why marry me at all? Because you were going to come here anyway. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I saw you at the village inn, asking questions, offering money for information. You would have gotten yourself killed within a week. This way. He stopped himself, the muscle in his jaw ticking again. This way I can protect you while you search. And maybe you'll find answers I couldn't. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even kind. But it was honest, and Cecily had learned to value honesty over pretty lies. I want access to your household records, she said. Visitor logs, staff rosters, anyone who's come or gone in the past 6 months. His eyebrows rose fractionally. Why? Because women don't just vanish into thin air. Someone knows something. Someone saw something. As in, if they won't talk to you or your trackers, maybe they documented it. She held his stare. You said I was resourceful. Let me be resourceful. For a moment, she thought he'd refuse. Then his mouth curved, not quite a smile, but close. You'll work with my beta, Gideon Hale. He'll provide what you need and make sure you don't get yourself killed doing it. I don't need a nursemaid. You need to survive long enough to find your sister. He moved past her toward the door, and she felt the loss of his proximity like a physical thing. First lesson of Greymore, Lady Winterbourne. Pride gets you buried. Pragmatism keeps you breathing. He was gone before she could argue. Cecily slept poorly, waking every hour to phantom sounds, footsteps on the roof, scratching at the windows, the distant howl of something that might have been wind. And when dawn finally broke, she dressed herself in one of the simple day gowns from her hastily packed trunk and went looking for answers. She found them in the estate office, where a man built like a prizefighter was reorganizing file boxes with methodical precision. Lady Winterbourne, he didn't look up. You're awake early. You must be Gideon Hale. Must be. He pulled another ledger from the shelf, muscles flexing beneath his shirt. His lordship said you'd want records. These are the household logs from the past year. Staff won't talk to you, so don't waste your time trying. Cecily moved to the desk, scanning the neat columns. Why won't they talk? Because they're pack, and pack business stays pack business. He finally looked at her, his eyes a shade of amber that definitely wasn't human. You're not pack, Lady Winterbourne. Marriage doesn't change that. Then what does? His smile was all teeth. Surviving long enough to earn it. She held his stare until he looked away first, then turned her attention to the ledgers. Arrivals, departures, supply deliveries, servant rotations. Everything documented in precise, color-coded script. Whoever kept these records was meticulous to the point of obsession. Who maintains these? She asked. Mrs. Dalloway. She's run this house since before his lordship was born. Gideon dropped into a chair, watching her with the kind of focused attention that prickled along her shoulders. You won't find anything useful in there. We already looked. You looked for pack-related anomalies. I'm looking for something else. Cecily's finger traced down the columns, her mind sorting patterns the way it always did, and a skill that had kept her family fed after her father's debts consumed everything else. Numbers, dates, inconsistencies. She'd balanced books for creditors who wanted to find reasons to seize property. She knew how to spot what didn't belong. There, a notation in the margin, barely visible. Her pulse kicked up. The day before Louisa disappeared, she said slowly, there was a delivery to the East Wing. Medical supplies, bandages, laudanum, surgical thread. She looked up at Gideon. Why would a country estate need surgical thread? His expression went carefully neutral. Hunting accidents happen. 3 times in 1 week? She flipped back pages, pointing to earlier entries. Here and here. Same supplier, same quantities. Always to the East Wing. She paused. The wing you told me I'm forbidden to enter. Gideon stood, at his chair scraping against the floor. Lady Winterbourne. Someone's being treated there. someone who needs regular medical care. Her mind raced ahead, connecting pieces. And the timing matches every disappearance. 1 week before each woman vanished, there's a medical supply delivery, like clockwork. You need to stop. Why? She rose to face him. Because I'm right? Because I just found something your trackers missed? Because you're about to stick your hand into a wolf trap and blame me when it snaps shut. Gideon's voice dropped to a growl. The East Wing is sealed for a reason. Whatever you think you found, it's not worth. The door slammed open. Ambrose filled the frame, still in riding clothes, his hair windswept and his eyes burning gold at the edges. Out, he said to Gideon. The beta left without a word. Ambrose closed the door with deliberate care, then turned that devastating focus entirely on Cecily. What did you find? She told him. Watched his expression shudder with each word. The East Wing, he said finally, houses our injured, pack members who can't heal properly or who've been contaminated by silver. It's not a secret. It's medical necessity. Then why forbid me from entering? Because seeing shifters in partial transformation is dangerous for humans. Because the smell of fear triggers hunting instincts. He moved closer and she refused to step back. Because I don't trust myself around you when my control is already hanging by a thread. And that wing is full of things that could snap it. Heat flooded her face, the bond she realized. He could feel her pulse racing, her breath catching. At the same way she could feel the tension radiating off him like a physical force. I need to see those records, she managed. No. Ambrose. I said no. His hand slammed down on the desk beside her, caging her in. You've been here 12 hours, Cecily. 12 hours, and you've already found a pattern my people missed in 6 months. Do you have any idea what that means? That I'm useful. That you're a target. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Whoever's behind this is intelligent, organized, and has access to this estate's most sensitive information. If they know you found this connection, they'll move. Against you. And I. His jaw clenched. I can't protect you if you won't follow the rules. Cecily's heart hammered against her ribs. She could feel the heat of him. I'd smell the forest and night air that clung to his skin. See the war happening behind his eyes. The wolf wanted to grab her, lock her away somewhere safe. The man knew she'd never forgive him if he tried. Then don't protect me, she said quietly. Partner with me. His breath caught. For one suspended moment, she thought he might kiss her, or shift, or both. Then he stepped back, the loss of proximity almost painful. You get supervised access to the medical logs. Gideon stays with you. You don't go anywhere alone. Not the moors, not the cellars, not even the damn gardens. His eyes were still more gold than gray. And if I tell you to run, Cecily, you run. No questions, no arguments. It wasn't partnership, but it was a start. Agreed, she said. He nodded once, sharp and final. Then he was gone, and leaving her alone with ledgers full of secrets and the uncomfortable awareness that she'd just bound herself more thoroughly than any contract could manage, to a man who was exactly as dangerous as the rumors claimed, and infinitely more compelling. She had come to Greymore for her sister. She was beginning to suspect she'd stay for something else entirely. Cecily woke to the sound of snarling in the courtyard below. She pushed back the heavy curtains to find dawn barely breaking over Greymore's eastern wing, and a ring of men, no, wolves, circling each other in the pale light. 2 shifted, massive and silver-furred. 3 still human, watching with the kind of stillness that suggested violence was only a heartbeat away. Gideon Hale stood at the center, fully human, arms crossed, as entirely unconcerned that he was flanked by predators who could tear him apart. Enough, his voice carried across the courtyard with absolute authority. The Alpha said stand down. That means stand down. The wolves didn't move. One of them, smaller, darker, bared its teeth. Gideon's eyes flashed gold. Don't make me ask twice. The shift happened so fast Cecily barely tracked it. One moment, 2 wolves. The next, 2 naked men on their knees in the gravel, breathing hard, submission written in every line of their bodies. Cecily stepped back from the window, her heart hammering. She'd married into a world where power wasn't negotiated. It was demonstrated. where the man she'd thought of as merely Ambrose's assistant could make grown shifters submit with a look. She needed to understand these rules before they killed her. Mrs. Dalloway appeared at breakfast with a tray and an expression that suggested Cecily's presence was a personal insult to good order. His lordship is occupied with estate business. You'll take your meals here until further notice. I'd prefer to eat in the dining room. The dining room is for family, my lady. The housekeeper's mouth thinned. Adjusting. Translation. Not pack, not trusted, not welcome at the table. Cecily smiled with her mother's practiced grace, the one reserved for creditors who thought a woman alone was easy prey. Then I'll take my breakfast in the estate office. I have work to do. Mrs. Dalloway's fingers tightened on the tray. The office is where Lord Winterbourne gave me explicit permission to work, with Mr. Hale's supervision. Cecily rose, smoothing her skirts. But unless you'd like to explain to his lordship why you're countermanding his direct orders. The housekeeper's jaw worked. Then she set the tray down with a sharp click and left without another word. Small victories, Cecily thought, but victories nonetheless. She found Gideon in the office exactly where she'd left him, surrounded by ledgers and looking like he hadn't slept. His shirt was different, which meant he'd gone home, changed, and come back. Or lived here. She wasn't sure which was more unsettling. Lady Winterbourne. He didn't look up from the medical inventory logs. You're persistent. You're unsurprised. His lordship doesn't choose weak women. He flipped a page, even when he probably should. Cecily moved to the desk, scanning the open ledger. More medical supplies. More Eastern Wing deliveries. More neat, methodical documentation that told her exactly what someone wanted her to see. And nothing about what they were hiding. The entries are too clean, she said. Gideon's pen paused. Explain. Mrs. Dalloway keeps perfect records. Color-coded, cross-referenced. Every detail accounted for. But these? She tapped the medical logs. These are different. Same handwriting, same format, but simplified. Like someone copied them from another source. She turned the ledger toward him. See? No supplier invoices, no staff signatures for receipt, no notes about storage location or usage, just quantities and dates. His eyes narrowed. You're saying these are false records? I'm saying these are surface records. The real information is somewhere else. She met his amber gaze. Where does Mrs. Dalloway keep the original invoices? The archives. Basement level, locked, heavily warded against. He cut himself off. Against what? Against people who don't belong there. His expression hardened. Which includes you. Then you go. I'm not your errand boy, Lady Winterbourne. No. You're the beta who's been ordered to help me investigate. So help. She held his stare. Unless you're afraid of what we'll find. For a moment, she thought he might actually bare his teeth. Then he stood, shoving back from the desk with enough force to make the chair scrape. 1 hour. And if this is a waste of my time, you can explain it to his lordship yourself. The archives were everything Cecily had expected, and worse. Damp stone walls, narrow corridors lit by gas lamps that flickered whenever the wind changed, and shelf after shelf of documents that smelled like mold and secrets. And Gideon moved through them with the confidence of someone who'd walked this path 1,000 times, stopping finally at a locked cabinet in the far corner. Invoices from the past year. He produced a key, unlocked it. Original records, not the cleaned versions upstairs. Cecily reached for the first bundle, her fingers already sorting dates. May, June, July. The medical supplies were there, exact quantities matching the upstairs ledger. But underneath each invoice, stapled with meticulous care, were additional pages, prescriptions, signed by Dr. Hargreaves. Her pulse kicked up. These aren't for hunting accidents. No. Gideon's voice was flat. They're not. She scanned the first prescription. Laudanum for pain management, silver nitrate for contamination treatment, wolfsbane extract in carefully measured doses. And at the bottom, as in Dr. Hargreaves' precise script, patient W, acute transformation instability, requires continued monitoring, patient W. She flipped to the next invoice, same pattern, different patient code. By the fifth bundle, her hands were shaking. "There are 7 patients," she said slowly. 7 people in the East Wing receiving treatment for transformation-related injuries. But you told me the disappearances numbered 3. Gideon's silence was answer enough. "How many women have actually gone missing, Mr. Hale?" 7. The word came out rough. "Over 18 months. Your sister was the 7th. The archives tilted. Cecily gripped the shelf to stay upright. 7, not 3. 7 women vanished, and Ambrose had lied about the number. Why would he? Because telling you the full scope would have sent you running. Or gotten you killed faster. Gideon moved closer, his voice dropping. "The pattern isn't random, Lady Winterbourne. Every woman who disappeared was human. Every woman was unattached. No family with resources. No social standing worth protecting. And every woman disappeared exactly 1 week after someone in the East Wing received emergency silver treatment." Her mind raced. Silver treatment means contamination, which means they were attacked. Or experimented on. The implication hit like a fist. You think someone is using rogue attacks as cover, deliberately infecting people to, what? Test treatments? I think someone is using human women as bait. Gideon's eyes flashed gold. Draw in rogues, stage an attack, treat the infected pack member, dispose of the witness. Clean, methodical. I'd repeat every 6 to 8 weeks when the moon cycle makes transformation control weakest. And the medical records document it all. Cecily's voice came out steadier than she felt. Which means the person running this operation has access to Dr. Hargreaves' work, either as a co-conspirator or the doctor himself. She looked up sharply. You've suspected this. Suspicion isn't proof, and accusing the pack's only physician of murdering human women requires more than a pattern in invoices. Gideon's jaw tightened. His lordship won't move without evidence. Real evidence. The kind that stands up to pack law and council scrutiny. Then we find it. Cecily straightened, her fear crystallizing into something sharper. Starting with patient records. If Dr. Hargreaves is treating 7 infected shifters, he's documenting their progress. We need those files. They're in the East Wing. Then we go to the East Wing. Absolutely not. Gideon caught her arm, the first time he'd touched her, and she felt the barely restrained strength in his grip. That wing is locked down for a reason. The patients there are dangerous, unstable, and your scent? He released her abruptly. Human scent triggers hunting instinct in shifters who can't control their transformation. You walk into that wing, you're prey. Cecily's heart hammered, but she kept her voice level. Then what do you suggest? I suggest you let me handle it. No. She met his amber gaze. We do this together, or I go alone. Your choice. For a long moment, they stood in the flickering lamplight. 2 people locked in a battle of wills. Neither could afford to lose. Then Gideon smiled, sharp and decidedly unfriendly. That you're either very brave or very stupid, Lady Winterbourne. I've been called both. She moved past him toward the stairs, usually by men who underestimated me. His low laugh followed her up into the light. She found Ambrose in the stables, grooming a black gelding with the kind of focused attention that suggested he was avoiding something. He didn't look up when she entered, but his shoulders tensed. That same hyper-awareness she felt whenever he was near, the bond pulling taut between them like a wire. Gideon told you, not a question. He showed me the invoices. Cecily stopped at the stall door, keeping the horse between them. Safer that way. 7 women, Ambrose. You said 3. I said 3 in the past 6 months. That was accurate. It was a lie of omission. It was strategy. He set down the brush, are finally meeting her eyes. You were already half convinced I was a monster. Telling you the full count would have confirmed it. So instead you let me discover it myself. Let me think you might be complicit. Better than you running before I could protect you, his voice dropped. And yes, Cecily, I expected you to dig. I wanted you to. Because women who dig find answers, and answers are what we need to stop this. The admission landed between them, sharp and honest. She hadn't expected that. The deliberate manipulation, yes, but not the respect underneath it. Not the acknowledgement that he'd tested her and she'd passed. The East Wing, she said. I need to see the patient records. No. Ambrose. I said no. He moved around the horse, closing the distance until she had to tilt her head back to hold his gaze. Yet the patients in that wing are pack members who were attacked while defending our territory. They're suffering, they're dangerous, and they don't need a human woman gawking at them like specimens. I'm not gawking. I'm investigating. You're looking for your sister. I understand that. But walking into a room full of shifters who can barely control their wolves, his hand lifted, hovering near her face but not quite touching. Your scent alone could trigger a shift, and if one of them attacks, I'd have to put them down to save you. Is that what you want? More blood on my hands because you couldn't wait? She could feel the heat of his palm, close enough to warm her cheek, could see the gold bleeding into his eyes, the way his control frayed at the edges when she pushed too hard. Then come with me, she said quietly. Your presence will control them, and I'll stay behind you. I won't speak, won't approach, won't do anything to trigger them. But I need to see those records, Ambrose, because if Dr. Hargreaves is involved, his patient notes might be the only proof we can use. His hand dropped. For a long moment, he just looked at her, searching for something she wasn't sure she wanted him to find. Tonight, he said finally, after moonrise, when they're sedated. And if I tell you to leave, you leave immediately. No arguments. Agreed. I mean it, Cecily. One hint of danger, and you're out. I understand, he stepped back. But the intensity didn't fade. If anything, it sharpened. That same focused attention he'd given the horse now turned entirely on her. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. His mouth curved, almost a smile. Is that disappointment I hear? It's... She paused, searching for the right word. Complicated. Yes. His voice went rough. It is. The air between them felt charged, electric. She should step back, put distance between them, remember why she was here. Instead, she heard herself ask, why did you really marry me, Ambrose? The truth this time. He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because I saw you at that inn, offering money you couldn't afford to lose for information no one would sell you. Because you looked like someone who'd walk into hell for the people you loved. And because... He stopped, jaw tightening. Because I knew you'd find a way into Greymore with or without my help. And at least this way, you'd survive long enough to get answers. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even particularly kind. But it was honest, and somehow that mattered more than pretty words ever could. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me yet. He turned back to the horse, dismissing her. You haven't seen the East Wing. Cecily spent the afternoon in the library, ostensibly researching local history while actually mapping the estate's layout from memory and overheard conversations. The East Wing connected to the main house through a covered walkway. 2 entrances, one from the ground floor gallery, one from the cellars, both locked, both guarded at night by shifters Gideon had called enforcers. She was sketching the rough floor plan when footsteps sounded behind her. You're good at that. Mrs. Dalloway's voice held a note of grudging respect. Watching, listening, putting pieces together. Cecily didn't turn. It's a useful skill. Dangerous skill. Or in this house, the housekeeper moved into view, carrying a tea tray she hadn't asked for. His lordship's previous fiancée had that skill too. Miss Carolyn, sharp girl, noticed things others missed. Cecily's pen paused. What happened to her? She left. 3 days before the wedding. Mrs. Dalloway set down the tray with precise care, packed her trunks in the middle of the night, and ran. His lordship let her go, paid her family's debts anyway, kept the scandal quiet, never spoke of it again. Why are you telling me this? Because you remind me of her, and because she was smart enough to run when she realized what she'd gotten into. The housekeeper's expression softened almost imperceptibly. You still could, my lady. Lord Winterbourne may need a wife, but he'd survive without you. The question is whether you'll survive with him. It was the closest thing to kindness Mrs. Dalloway had offered. Cecily turned, meeting the older woman's gaze directly. Did Miss Caroline ever ask about the East Wing? The housekeeper's face shuddered. She asked about a great many things. And you sent her away without answers. I sent her away breathing. Mrs. Dalloway's voice dropped. Some questions, my lady, have answers that get people killed. You'd do well to remember that. She left before Cecily could respond. The warning settled over her like a shroud. Miss Caroline had noticed things, had asked questions, and had been frightened badly enough to abandon a wedding 3 days before the ceremony, abandoning whatever financial security it would have brought. What had she discovered in the East Wing? And was Cecily about to find out? Moonrise came with clouds and the smell of rain. Cecily met Ambrose in the portrait gallery at midnight, dressed in her simplest gown and carrying nothing but a shawl and her nerve. He looked at her for a long moment, cataloging her readiness, her fear, the stubborn set of her jaw, and then nodded once. Stay behind me. Don't speak unless I ask you a direct question. And if I shift, get out. You said they'd be sedated. Sedation fails. His eyes were already more gold than gray, especially when instinct overrides reason. He unlocked the gallery door with a key that hung on a chain around his neck, and led her into a corridor that smelled like carbolic and something darker. Blood, pain, fear. The scent hit Cecily hard enough to make her stomach turn, but she followed Ambrose deeper into the wing. I'm past locked doors and the sound of low animal whimpering that made the hair rise on her arms. The patient ward was a converted ballroom, elegant bones stripped down to practical necessity. 7 beds, each occupied, each surrounded by medical equipment that looked more like restraints than treatment. Gas lamps turned low. Dr. Hargreaves bent over the nearest patient, adjusting an IV drip. He looked up when they entered, his expression carefully neutral. Lord Winterbourne, I wasn't expecting you tonight. Lady Winterbourne needs to see the patient records. All of them. The doctor's gaze slid to Cecily, sharp and assessing. That's highly irregular. So is having 7 contaminated shifters in my house without a cure in sight. Ambrose's voice was cold, absolute authority. The records, doctor. Now. Doctor. Hargreaves' hands stilled on the IV. For a moment, Cecily thought he might refuse. Then he straightened, moving to a locked cabinet at the far end of the room. The contamination cases are complex. The silver bonding to their systems is... He stopped mid-sentence. Cecily followed his gaze to the nearest bed, where the patient, a young man, barely 20, had opened his eyes, gold eyes, fixed directly on her. The change happened faster than thought. One moment, restrained patient. The next, a wolf mid-shift, snapping leather straps like thread, lunging toward her with teeth bared and murder in his eyes. Ambrose moved. She didn't see the shift, just the massive silver wolf that materialized between her and the attack, slamming the contaminated shifter back into the bed with enough force to crack the frame. A snarl ripped through the room, a deep and resonant and absolutely dominant. Every patient went still. The young shifter, still half transformed, bleeding from where Ambrose's teeth had caught his shoulder, dropped his gaze and whimpered submission. Ambrose didn't move, just stood there, hackles raised, a wall of muscle and menace between Cecily and anything that might threaten her. Dr. Hargreaves stepped forward carefully. Lord Winterbourne, I need to sedate him before... The wolf's head swung toward the doctor. The snarl deepened. Ambrose. Cecily kept her voice low, steady, the same tone she'd use with a spooked horse. I'm safe. You protected me. I'm safe. The wolf's ears flicked back. His massive head turned just enough to confirm she was still standing, still whole. Then slowly, the shift reversed, fur receding, bones cracking back into human shape. Ambrose straightened on 2 legs, breathing hard, his eyes still burning gold. Get her out, he said to Dr. Hargreaves. His voice was barely human. Now. The records. I'll bring them myself. Ambrose didn't take his eyes off the contaminated shifter. Go, before I lose control again. Dr. Hargreaves grabbed a leather portfolio from the cabinet and thrust it at Cecily. Take these, study them elsewhere, and don't come back here. Cecily's hands closed on the portfolio, her pulse still hammering. She wanted to stay, to ask questions, to understand what she'd just witnessed. But the look in Ambrose's eyes was feral enough to override every other instinct. She ran. She made it to her rooms before her hands started shaking, and made it through locking the door and lighting the lamps before the full weight of what had happened crashed over her. That young shifter had looked at her like prey, had moved with killing intent. And Ambrose had shifted in less than a heartbeat to save her, had positioned himself between her and death without hesitation, had nearly lost control protecting her from the very danger he'd warned about. Cecily sank into the chair by the fire, the portfolio heavy in her lap. She should open it, should read the patient records while the information was fresh, should focus on finding the pattern that would lead her to Louisa. Instead, she sat in the firelight and tried not to think about the way Ambrose had looked at her afterward, eyes still gold, breathing ragged, barely holding on to his human skin, and tried not to think about the way her own pulse had kicked up when he'd looked at her. Not with fear, with something else entirely. The knock at her door came an hour later. She knew who it was before she opened it. Ambrose stood in the corridor, fully dressed now, his hair still damp from washing away the blood. His eyes were gray again, but the tension in his shoulders suggested the wolf wasn't far beneath the surface. "Are you all right?" His voice was rough. "Yes." She stepped back, letting him enter. "Are you?" "No." He moved to the fire, keeping distance between them. "I nearly killed him. One of my own people, because he looked at you wrong. He attacked me. He's contaminated. He doesn't know what he's doing." Ambrose's hands clenched at his sides. "And I nearly ripped his throat out anyway." "That's not protection, Cecily. That's possession, and it's exactly why I shouldn't be anywhere near you." She should agree, should tell him to leave, to stay away, to let her work alone. Instead, she heard herself say, "You saved my life. I endangered it by bringing you there. I would have gone anyway. You know I would have." He turned finally, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "Yes, which is why I can't let you do this alone, and why I can't trust myself around you. Do you understand? The bond doesn't just make separation painful. It makes protecting you an instinct stronger than reason, stronger than pack law, stronger than my own control." He took a step toward her. "And that makes me dangerous, Cecily. To you, to everyone around us." She should step back, should maintain distance. Instead, she moved closer, closing the space between them until she could see the gold flickering at the edges of his irises. "Then teach me," she said quietly. "Teach me the rules, the pack dynamics. What triggers the wolf and what calms it. Because I'm not leaving Ambrose. Not until I find Louisa. And if we're bound together, if separation hurts us both, then we need to learn how to work together without you losing control every time someone looks at me wrong." For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then his hand lifted, and this time he didn't stop before touching her. His palm cupped her jaw, thumb brushing her cheekbone with a gentleness that seemed impossible for someone who'd been a snarling wolf minutes ago. "You're either the bravest woman I've ever met," he said softly, "or the most foolish. Both." Her voice came out breathier than she'd intended. "Definitely both." His thumb traced her lower lip, and heat flooded through her, sharp and undeniable and completely inappropriate given the circumstances. She should pull away, should remember that this was strategy, survival, a means to an end. Instead, she leaned into his touch. Ambrose's breath caught. His eyes went molten gold. And then, with visible effort, he stepped back, his hand falling away. "Read the records," he said, his voice strained. "Find the pattern. We'll talk in the morning." He was gone before she could respond, leaving her alone with a racing heart and the ghostly warmth of his touch still burning on her skin. Cecily pressed her fingers to her jaw where he'd touched her and tried to remember why wanting him was dangerous. The bond pulsed in her chest, and a physical ache that had nothing to do with separation and everything to do with proximity denied. She opened the portfolio and forced herself to focus on what mattered. 7 patients, 7 victims, and somewhere in these records, the key to finding her sister. She read until dawn, and by the time the sun rose over Greymoor's moors, she knew 3 things for certain. Dr. Hargreaves was documenting his patients with scientific precision that suggested experimentation, not treatment. The contamination pattern wasn't random, it was escalating, targeting stronger shifters with each iteration. And the last entry, dated 2 days before Louisa disappeared, referenced a promising human subject, who'd been acquired for compatibility testing. Cecily closed the portfolio, her hands steady despite the fury building in her chest, and she'd found her sister's trail, and it led straight through the doctor who'd looked her in the eye tonight and lied. Cecily found Dr. Hargreaves in his study at dawn, surrounded by leather-bound journals and the kind of careful organization that suggested a man with something to hide. He looked up when she entered without knocking, his expression sliding from surprise to calculation in the space of a heartbeat. "Lady Winterbourne, I wasn't expecting. Louisa Whitmore." Cecily set the patient file on his desk with deliberate precision. "You referenced her 2 days before she disappeared. Promising human subject. Acquired for compatibility testing." "What did that mean, doctor?" His hands went very still on the journal he'd been writing in. "You misunderstand the notation. That entry referred to blood samples for... Don't lie to me," she leaned forward, keeping her voice level despite the fury building in her chest. 7 contaminated shifters, 7 missing women, and every disappearance preceded by emergency silver treatment. You're not treating contamination, Dr. Hargreaves. You're causing it. For a long moment, the only sound was the tick of the clock on the mantel. Then the doctor's expression shifted. Not guilt, but something colder. Assessment. "You're clever," he said quietly. "Lord Winterbourne chose well. But cleverness without context is dangerous, my lady. You're making accusations you can't prove and don't fully understand." "Then explain it to me." "I can't." He closed the journal, locked it in his desk drawer. "Not because I'm guilty of what you're suggesting, but because the work I do here is protected by PAC law and medical confidentiality. If you want answers, you'll need to ask Lord Winterbourne. He authorized every treatment, every test, every..." The door slammed open. Ambrose filled the frame, Gideon at his shoulder, both of them radiating the kind of controlled violence that made the air feel electric. "She's asking you," Ambrose said, his voice deadly quiet. "Answer her." Dr. Hargreaves stood slowly, hands raised. "My lord, I was just explaining that without your explicit permission, I cannot... I'm removing that protection. Now." Ambrose moved into the room, and Cecily felt the shift in power like a physical thing. "Tell her what you've been doing in the East Wing, doctor. All of it." The silence stretched taut. Then Dr. Hargreaves sank back into his chair, suddenly looking older. "The contamination cases aren't random attacks," he said finally. "They're controlled exposures, silver bonding experiments designed to..." "To what?" Cecily's hands clenched on the desk edge. "Create more monsters? To cure them." The doctor's voice hardened. "Pure silver kills shifters, but in carefully measured doses, bonded to specific compounds, it can suppress transformation, stop the shift entirely, give PAC members control they'd never have otherwise." He looked at Ambrose. "You authorized the research yourself, my lord. After the incident with your father, you said you'd do anything to ensure no Alpha would lose control the way he did." Ambrose's face went carefully blank. "I authorized contamination research, not human experimentation. The research requires human subjects. We needed to test compatibility, rejection rates, binding efficacy. Using women who disappeared?" Cecily's voice cracked. "Using my sister?" "Using volunteers." Dr. Hargreaves met her gaze without flinching. "Women who were offered compensation, medical care, and the opportunity to help prevent future attacks. Your sister included." The words hit like a fist. Cecily gripped the desk to stay upright. "You're lying. Louisa would never." She was desperate. The doctor pulled a folder from his locked drawer, slid it across the desk. "Your father's debts extended beyond what you knew. The creditors were threatening criminal charges. Your sister came to me, asking if there was any work available at Greymore, any way to earn enough to keep your family from debtor's prison." He paused. "I offered her a solution." Cecily opened the folder with shaking hands. Contract. Signed in Louisa's handwriting, payment terms, confidentiality clause, and at the bottom, in her sister's familiar script, "For Cecily, so she doesn't have to fix this alone." "Where is she?" Cecily's voice came out barely above a whisper. "I don't know." Dr. Hargreaves' expression showed the first crack of genuine emotion. "The first 3 subjects completed treatment and were released. The next 4, including your sister, experienced severe reactions: rejection of the silver bonding, acute transformation instability, cognitive deterioration. He swallowed hard. They were transferred to a secure facility for intensive care. I was told they were stable, but I haven't had access to them in over a month. Transferred by whom? Ambrose's voice was ice. Lord Alaric Winterbourne. He said the council authorized it. That the research needed to move to a more controlled environment. The doctor's hands trembled. I believed him. He's your heir, your Beta's superior officer. I had no reason to question. Ambrose moved so fast Cecily barely saw it. One moment standing. The next, the doctor was pinned against the wall, Ambrose's forearm across his throat. Where did he take them? The words came out half-growl. I don't know. I swear on pack law. I don't know. Dr. Hargreaves gasped for air. He said it was council business, sealed location. He'd send updates, but he sent nothing. Gideon's voice cut through the room. Because there is no council authorization. I checked. Alaric's been operating independently for over a year. Ambrose released the doctor, who crumpled against the wall. At how long have you known? 3 days. Gideon's expression was carved from stone. Since Lady Winterbourne found the invoice pattern. I've been tracing Alaric's movements, his financial records, his communications. He's been staging the rogue attacks to justify silver research funding, using the contaminated patients as proof that we need his cure, and siphoning council resources to a private facility. He paused. On the moors, the old Ashworth estate, abandoned for 20 years, but recently showing signs of occupation. Cecily's pulse kicked up. How far? 5 miles east. Rough terrain. Gideon looked at her. You're not going. Like hell I'm not. Cecily. Ambrose turned, his eyes still more gold than gray. If Alaric has 4 contaminated subjects in an unsecured location, it's a trap. He knows we'll come. He's counting on it. Then we spring the trap and turn it on him. She met his gaze without flinching. He has my sister, Ambrose. Whatever he's planning, I'm not waiting for him to execute it. They had 30 minutes to plan before Lord Alaric Winterbourne arrived at Greymoor's gates with a magistrate, 6 enforcers, and a legal writ declaring Ambrose mentally unfit to hold his title. Cecily watched from the library window as the procession approached, polished, organized, devastatingly legitimate. Alaric himself rode at the front, looking every inch the concerned cousin. Well-dressed, sympathetic, appropriately grave. He's moving faster than I expected. Gideon appeared at her shoulder, his voice grim. This is a council-level challenge. If he succeeds in having Ambrose declared incompetent, he takes everything. Title, estate, pack authority. Can he do that? If he has evidence of instability, violence, or threat to pack welfare, yes. Gideon's hands flexed at his sides. And 4 missing women plus 7 contaminated shifters under Ambrose's watch. That's all the evidence he needs. But Ambrose didn't cause the contamination. Alaric did. Proving that requires access to the facility, which Alaric will never grant voluntarily. Gideon turned to her, his amber eyes sharp, unless someone gives him a reason he can't refuse. Understanding hit her like cold water. You want me to negotiate with him. I want you to be the bait that brings him to the table. Gideon's voice dropped. Alaric's weakness is pride. He thinks he's smarter than everyone in this house. If you, Lord Winterbourne's clever new wife, approach him privately, are offering to testify against Ambrose in exchange for your sister's safety. He'll believe I'm desperate enough to betray my husband. Cecily's mind raced ahead. And if he takes me to see Louisa as a proof of good faith, we follow you, storm the facility, free the subjects, and get the evidence we need to destroy his challenge. Gideon's expression was carved from stone. It's dangerous. If he suspects the trap, he could kill you before we reach you. And if Ambrose finds out we're using you as bait, he'll stop us. He'll lose control entirely. The bond won't allow him to let you walk into danger alone. Gideon met her gaze directly. This only works if you convince Alaric without Ambrose knowing until it's too late. Cecily's throat tightened. Lying to Ambrose felt like tearing something essential. But her sister was in that facility, and every minute they delayed was another minute Louisa suffered. Tell me what to say. She found Alaric in the drawing room, charming the magistrate with concern so practiced it almost looked genuine. He glanced up when she entered, his smile widening. "Lady Winterbourne, how lovely to finally meet you properly. I'm Lord Alaric Winterbourne, Ambrose's cousin." He gestured to the magistrate. "We were just discussing my unfortunate duty today, declaring my husband incompetent." Cecily kept her voice steady, playing the role Gideon had outlined. "I need to speak with you, privately." Alaric's eyebrows rose, but he dismissed the magistrate with practiced ease. When they were alone, he leaned against the mantel with studied casualness. "You have questions about the proceedings, and I assume?" "I have questions about my sister." Cecily moved closer, letting desperation show in her voice. "Louisa Whitmore. Dr. Hargreaves told me she volunteered for medical research and then disappeared. You transferred her to a secure facility over a month ago." Something flickered in Alaric's eyes. Interest. Did he now? How indiscreet. "I need to know if she's alive, if she's safe." Cecily forced her hands to tremble. "I married Lord Winterbourne to find her, but if you're taking his title, if you're assuming control of Greymore and its research, I need to know what happens to Louisa. And what would you offer in exchange for that information?" Alaric's voice was silk over steel. "Testimony against Ambrose." She met his gaze. "I've seen his instability firsthand. The violence, the loss of control. And if the council needs evidence that he's unfit to rule, I can provide it." Alaric studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, genuine this time, delighted. "You surprise me, Lady Winterbourne. I assumed you'd be blindly loyal. Most women are when the bond sets in." "The bond is exactly why I'm here." Cecily let bitterness creep into her voice. "He didn't tell me what I was signing, didn't warn me about the pain, the obsession, the way separation feels like dying. I didn't choose this, and I won't sacrifice my sister to protect a man who trapped me." It was close enough to truth to be convincing. She saw the moment Alaric believed her, saw calculation shift to satisfaction. "I can arrange a visit," he said slowly, "to confirm your sister's condition, but it must be today before the council hearing, and then you'll come alone." "Agreed." "Excellent." Alaric moved toward the door. "We leave in an hour. And Lady Winterbourne?" He glanced back. "If you're playing me, you and your sister will both regret it." She held his gaze. "I'm not playing anyone. I just want my family back." He left, still smiling. Cecily waited until his footsteps faded, then sank into the nearest chair, her hands shaking for real now. She'd done it. Set the trap. Bought them access to the facility. Now she just had to survive what came next. Ambrose found her 10 minutes later, and the look in his eyes told her he already knew. "Gideon told you, not a question. He told me you were playing bait for my bastard cousin." "Yes." His voice was deadly calm. "See, what he couldn't explain was why you thought I'd allow it. Because it's the only way to find Louisa and expose Alaric before he takes your title." Cecily stood, meeting his fury head on. "And because I'm not asking permission, Ambrose. I'm telling you what I'm doing." His eyes flashed gold. "You're walking into a trap. I'm springing a trap. There's a difference. Not to the bond." He moved closer, and she could feel the tension radiating off him. Wolf and man both fighting for dominance. "You go to that facility, and every instinct I have will scream at me to follow, to protect, to claim. And when Alaric inevitably tries to hurt you, because he will, Cecily, that's the entire point of this. I will lose control. Completely. And do you understand what that means? It means Gideon and the trackers need to be ready to contain you if necessary. It means I might kill everyone in that building." His hands clenched at his sides, knuckles white with strain, including the people we're trying to save, including you. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat of him. "Then don't follow me into the building. Wait outside. Let Gideon lead the rescue. Trust me to handle Alaric long enough for your people to get there." "I can't." The words came out strangled. "The bond won't let me. You're in danger, and I—" He turned away sharply, shoulders rigid. "I can't lose you, Cecily. I can't watch another person He cut himself off. The unfinished sentence hung between them, heavy with implication. "Another person you what?" she asked softly. "It's another person I care about." His voice was rough. My father lost control during a challenge, killed 3 pack members before the council put him down. I was 14. I watched them execute him because he couldn't master the wolf, couldn't protect his people from himself. He looked back at her, his eyes burning gold. I've spent 12 years making sure I'd never become him. Never let the wolf override reason. Never let emotion compromise control. And then you walked into my house, and everything I've built. Every wall, every rule, every carefully maintained distance, it's all falling apart. Her breath caught. Ambrose, I need you to stay. The words came out barely above a whisper. I need you to let Gideon handle this. I need you to be safe, because if something happens to you, I will burn the entire world to get you back. And I won't care who I hurt doing it. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her, and it was exactly why she couldn't stay. My sister is in that facility, she said quietly, suffering, afraid, waiting for someone to find her, and I promised myself I'd bring her home, no matter what it cost. She moved closer, her hand rising to cup his face the way he'd touched her. I'm not asking you to watch. I'm asking you to trust me. Trust that I can do this. Trust that I'll come back. His hand covered hers, pressing her palm tight against his cheek. And if you don't, then you make Alaric regret ever touching my family. She held his gaze. But I will come back, Ambrose. For Louisa, for answers. She swallowed hard. For you. The last 2 words changed everything. He pulled her close, not rough, but deliberate. His other hand sliding into her hair. For one suspended moment, they stood locked together, breathing the same air, both of them balanced on the knife's edge between restraint and surrender. When this is over, he said, his voice low and rough, we're having a very different conversation. Promises, Lord Winterbourne? Threats, Lady Winterbourne. But his thumb traced her jaw with a gentleness that contradicted the word. Come back to me alive, and I'll show you exactly how dangerous I can be. Heat flooded through her, sharp and undeniable. She wanted to close the distance, wanted to find out what his mouth would feel like, what the wolf would taste like when he finally let go. Instead, she stepped back, steadying herself. 1 hour, she said, and then I'm keeping that bastard talking until you arrive. He nodded once, I releasing her. Gideon will track you. The moment Alaric reveals the location, we move. His eyes were still molten gold. And Cecily, if he touches you, I don't care about pack law or council politics or anything else. I will end him. She believed him. The Ashworth estate rose from the moors like a wound, all crumbling stone and broken windows, surrounded by fog thick enough to hide an army. Alaric led her through the front entrance with a proprietary air, 2 enforcers flanking them. The facility is underground, he explained, unlocking a door that led to descending stairs. My predecessor used it for wine storage. I found it serves a more practical purpose. Cecily forced herself to breathe evenly as they descended. Gas lamps flickered against damp stone walls. The smell hit her halfway down, blood, fear, chemicals. And her stomach turned, but she kept moving. The corridor at the bottom was lined with cells, modern locks, reinforced doors, and behind the first one, Louisa. Cecily's sister looked up from where she sat on a narrow cot, and the recognition in her eyes was immediate. Louisa surged to her feet, pressing against the door. Cecily, oh God, Cecily, you shouldn't be here. I came to take you home. Cecily gripped the bars, drinking in the sight of her sister, thinner, bruised, but alive. Are you hurt? Louisa's eyes cut to Alaric. I'm fine, but you need to leave. She knows what I am, Alaric said pleasantly. Don't you, Lady Winterbourne? You figured out that I've been using your precious research to build something better than Ambrose's pathetic control experiments. He moved to the next cell, gesturing inside. 4 subjects, 4 successful silver bondings. Not suppressions, enhancements. Shifters who can transform at will, who don't lose their minds to the wolf, who answer only to the alpha who freed them. Cecily looked into the cell. The young woman inside had eyes that flickered between human brown and wolf gold. Claws extended from her fingertips, even in human form. When she smiled, her teeth were too sharp. You're not curing them, Cecily breathed. You're creating weapons. I'm creating the future. Alaric's voice hardened. Ambrose wants to suppress what we are, make us weak, controllable. I want to embrace it, perfect it. And when the council sees what I've built, when they understand that I can create an army of enhanced shifters who never lose control, they'll give me everything Ambrose has been too weak to claim. And the women who died? The ones who rejected the bonding. Acceptable losses. Alaric's expression didn't change. Every advancement requires sacrifice. Fury flooded through Cecily, hot and clean and utterly focused. You murdered them. I freed them from mediocrity. He moved closer, and she saw the moment his expression shifted from pleasant to predatory. Just as I'm about to free you from my cousin's pathetic obsession. You see, Lady Winterbourne, the bond you're suffering through, it's not natural, it's manufactured. A side effect of the marriage ritual, combining with latent pack magic. And it can be broken if the bonded alpha is removed from power. Her blood went cold. You're going to kill him. I'm going to let the council execute him for violating pack law, are creating contaminated shifters, hiding human deaths, losing control during a challenge. Alaric smiled. All I need is your testimony confirming his instability, which you've already agreed to provide. I lied. Obviously, his hand shot out, gripping her throat, not crushing but threatening. But you'll testify anyway, because if you don't, your sister's silver bonding will progress to the final stage, the one where we see if her human body can survive complete transformation. Most can't, Louisa screamed behind the bars. Cecily clawed at Alaric's hand, her vision swimming. She'd miscalculated. Thought she had time before he moved against her. Thought Gideon would. The explosion of shattering stone came from above. Alaric's head snapped up. His grip loosened just enough for Cecily to drive her knee into his stomach and tear free. She stumbled back, gasping, as the ceiling cracked and a massive silver wolf dropped through the opening in a shower of debris and rage. Ambrose. Number. Not Ambrose. The wolf who'd been barely restrained for days, finally unleashed. He hit Alaric with enough force to shatter bones. The enforcers shifted instantly, but Gideon and 3 trackers poured through the gap, engaging them before they could reach their lord. Cecily ran to Louisa's cell, searching desperately for keys, a release mechanism, anything. Here, Dr. Hargreaves appeared from the shadows, bloodied and limping, a ring of keys in his hand. I'm sorry for all of it. Let me help. She didn't have time to question, just grabbed the keys and unlocked Louisa's cell, pulling her sister into her arms. The others, Louisa gasped. You have to free them. I will. I promise. Cecily shoved the keys at Dr. Hargreaves. Get them out. All of them. Behind her, Ambrose and Alaric fought with savage intensity. Not wolf against wolf, but wolf against desperately shifting hybrid. Alaric had injected himself with his own serum, was changing mid-fight, claws extending, bones cracking, trying to match Ambrose's strength. It wasn't enough. Ambrose's jaws closed on Alaric's shoulder, slamming him into the stone floor hard enough to crack it. Blood splattered. Alaric screamed. And Cecily saw the exact moment Ambrose's control frayed entirely, saw the wolf preparing to tear out his cousin's throat. Ambrose, no, she didn't think. Just ran forward, putting herself between predator and prey. Don't kill him, please. We need him alive to testify. The wolf's eyes locked on hers, gold, wild, barely recognizing her. It's me, she said softly. It's Cecily. I'm safe. Louisa's safe. You saved us. But I need you to come back now. Come back to me. For one terrible moment, she thought he wouldn't. Thought the wolf had won completely. Then the shift reversed, fur receding, bones cracking back to human shape. Ambrose staggered upright, breathing hard, his eyes finally clearing to gray. Cecily! Her name came out wrecked. She closed the distance between them, her hands framing his face. I'm here. I'm safe. You're bleeding. His thumb brushed her throat where Alaric had gripped. It's nothing. It's not nothing. His voice was still rough, inhuman. He hurt you. And you stopped him. She held his gaze. You saved me. Saved Louisa. Saved all of them. You didn't lose control, Ambrose. You chose when to unleash it and when to stop. That's not weakness. That's strength. His breath shuddered out, and then with a sound that was half growl, half surrender, he pulled her against him and kissed her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't sweet. It was raw and desperate and inevitable, the collision of everything they'd been holding back for days. His mouth was demanding, possessive, claiming her with an intensity that should have terrified her. Instead, she kissed him back just as fiercely. Her fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer. Her body pressed against his, feeling every hard line of muscle, every shudder of breath. The bond flared between them, not painful, but bright and electric and right. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead dropped to hers. "I told you," he said roughly. "When this was over, we'd have a different conversation. This isn't a conversation." Her voice came out shakier than she'd intended. "No." His hands tightened on her waist. "It's a claiming. And when we get home, when your sister is safe and Alaric is in council custody." His mouth brushed her jaw, her throat, the bruises Alaric had left. "I'm going to finish what we just started." Heat pooled low in her stomach. "Is that a threat, Lord Winterbourne?" "It's a promise, Lady Winterbourne." He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "And I always keep my promises." The journey back to Greymore took 3 hours by carriage, long enough for Dr. Hargreaves to stabilize the freed subjects, for Gideon to secure Alaric in silver chains, and for Cecily to hold her sister while Louisa cried herself into exhausted sleep. Ambrose rode outside with the trackers, and giving Cecily space she suspected he thought she needed. She watched him through the window, riding that black gelding with perfect control, his shoulders tense, his eyes scanning the moors for threats that wouldn't come. He'd kissed her in front of his beta, his trackers, and 4 traumatized witnesses, had claimed her publicly, irrevocably, in a way that made the bond between them undeniable, and now he was giving her room to regret it. She almost laughed, as if regret were possible when her mouth still burned from his kiss, when her body still remembered the feel of him pressed against her, when the bond hummed contentedly in her chest for the first time since they'd married. "He's different with you." Louisa's voice was hoarse from screaming, but steady. "Lord Winterbourne, I've never seen an alpha look at anyone the way he looks at you." Cecily turned from the window. "You've met other alphas. The enhanced subjects Alaric created. They were supposed to be elite guards. He brought in visiting pack leaders to demonstrate his cure." Louisa's hands twisted in her lap. "They all looked at us like experiments, like tools. But Lord Winterbourne looked at you like," she paused, "like losing you would end him." The observation settled over Cecily like a weight. "I blackmailed my way into his house looking for you. He married me to keep me from getting killed. This wasn't supposed to be love." Louisa's smile was sad. "No, but it is anyway, isn't it?" Cecily didn't answer. Couldn't. Because the truth was complicated and simple all at once. She'd come to Greymore for her sister, and but somewhere between invoice patterns and protective shifts and promises made in stables, she'd started staying for something else entirely, for a man who'd given her access when he could have locked her away, who'd trusted her competence when his own people doubted, who'd revealed his deepest wound and then handed her the power to destroy him, and trusted she wouldn't, for a partnership that felt more real than any pretty lie. The council arrived at Greymore 2 days later, 5 elders in formal robes, carrying enough authority to strip an alpha of everything. They convened in the great hall with Alaric chained before them, Ambrose standing as the accused, and Cecily seated in the gallery as the witness who could tip the balance either way. Elder Rosewood, a silver-haired woman with eyes like flint, surveyed the room with obvious displeasure. "Lord Ambrose Winterbourne, you stand accused of gross negligence in your duties as alpha. 7 human deaths, 4 illegal contamination experiments, and willful concealment of rogue activity within your territory." Her voice carried through the hall. "How do you answer these charges?" The deaths and experiments were orchestrated by Lord Alaric Winterbourne, as evidenced by the facility on the Ashworth estate, and testimony from Dr. Edmund Hargreaves. Ambrose's voice was steady, absolute. "I take responsibility for failing to detect his machinations sooner, but I did not authorize human experimentation, did not conceal rogue activity, and moved to stop the operation the moment I had proof. Proof obtained by your wife. Elder Rosewood's gaze shifted to Cecily. Lady Winterbourne, you infiltrated your husband's household under false pretenses, investigated sealed pack business, and deliberately endangered yourself by confronting Lord Alaric. Why should this council believe your testimony is unbiased? Cecily stood, meeting the elder's stare directly. Because I don't care about pack politics or alpha challenges, Elder Rosewood. I care about my sister, who was lured into experimentation by Lord Alaric's promises of compensation. I care about the 3 women who died because no one was willing to investigate their disappearances properly. And I care about the truth, which is that Lord Ambrose Winterbourne had the resources to bury this scandal entirely, to let those women stay missing, to execute his cousin quietly and claim credit for stopping the experiments himself. She paused. He didn't. He brought you here. I exposed his own failures and trusted the council to see the difference between negligence and malice. Silence filled the hall. Then Elder Rosewood turned to Alaric. And you, Lord Alaric, what do you say to these charges? Alaric smiled, sharp and unrepentant. I say I did what was necessary to advance our people beyond the pathetic limitations Ambrose accepts as inevitable. Silver bonding works. The enhanced subjects are proof. If the council has any vision at all, you'll see that I've created the future of our species. You created weapons without authorization. Elder Rosewood's voice went cold. You murdered human civilians. You staged rogue attacks to manipulate council funding. And you attempted to usurp a seated alpha through fabricated charges. She looked at the other elders. The evidence is clear. The sentence should be equally so. The vote was unanimous. Alaric Winterbourne was stripped of rank, exiled from Packlands, and marked rogue, a sentence that meant death if he ever returned to council territory. They dragged him from the hall still smiling, as if exile were a temporary setback, rather than social annihilation. Elder Rosewood turned back to Ambrose. As for you, Lord Winterbourne, the council finds your handling of this matter adequate. You failed to detect the threat within your own house, but you acted decisively once informed. You will submit to quarterly oversight for the next 2 years to ensure proper pack governance. She paused. However, there remains the question of your leadership. You've been absent from council proceedings for over a year. You've isolated yourself at Greymore, refused alpha challenges, and declined to assert your authority within the greater pack structure. This council needs to know, are you fit to rule, or should we appoint a replacement? The question hung in the air like a blade. Cecily's hands clenched on the gallery railing. This was it. The moment Ambrose had been avoiding for 12 years. The choice between safety and power, between isolation and leadership, between the man he'd been and the alpha he could become. Ambrose looked up at the elders, his shoulders straight, his eyes clear. I am fit to rule, but not alone. He turned, his gaze finding Cecily's. I propose a formal co-leadership structure. Lady Winterbourne has demonstrated investigative skills, strategic planning, and the ability to navigate both human and pack politics. She found a conspiracy I missed. She negotiated an extraction I couldn't have managed without losing control. And she did it while managing the bond complications I should have warned her about from the beginning. He looked back at Elder Rosewood. She's my mate, my partner, and the reason I'm willing to reclaim this position. If the council will accept joint governance, I'll return to active leadership immediately. The elders exchanged glances. Then Elder Rosewood smiled, small and approving. The council accepts. Greymore will operate under joint authority, with quarterly reviews to assess efficacy. Lady Winterbourne, do you accept this position? Every eye in the hall turned to her. Cecily looked at Ambrose, at the man who'd just publicly offered her equal standing, who'd acknowledged her competence before the highest authority in pack law, and who'd trusted her enough to share power he'd spent years refusing to claim. She thought about walking away, going back to her old life, taking Louisa somewhere safe and ordinary, and realized she didn't want safe and ordinary anymore. She wanted this, the challenge, the partnership, the chance to use her skills for something bigger than balancing books for creditors, the chance to build something real with a man who saw her completely and chose her anyway. I accept, she said. The celebration that night was small. Just Gideon, Dr. Hargreaves, Mrs. Dalloway, and Louisa, who'd recovered enough to tolerate company. They gathered in the dining room Cecily had been banned from her first day, and the irony wasn't lost on anyone. To Lady Winterbourne, Gideon raised his glass. His amber eyes warm for the first time since she'd met him. Who proved that humans can be just as terrifying as shifters when properly motivated. To my sister, Louisa added quietly, who came into hell to find me. To the new co-alpha, Mrs. Dalloway said, and there was genuine respect in her voice now. May Greymore thrive under your partnership. Cecily looked at Ambrose, found him already watching her with an intensity that made heat pool low in her stomach. To second chances, he said softly, and the people brave enough to demand them. They drank, talked, laughed more easily than Cecily would have thought possible a week ago. And when the evening finally wound down and the guests dispersed, she found herself alone with Ambrose in the now empty hall. Walk with me, he said. She took his offered arm, and they moved through Greymoor's corridors in comfortable silence, and past the portrait gallery where they'd first entered the East Wing, past the library where she'd mapped the estate, past the drawing room where she'd deceived Alaric. He led her finally to his private study, a room she'd never seen, all dark wood and leather and books that looked actually read rather than decorative. I need to tell you something, he said, closing the door behind them, before this goes any further. Her heart kicked up. All right? He moved to the window, putting space between them like he needed distance for what came next. When I asked you to co-lead with me, I meant it. Equal authority, equal input, equal standing in pack law and council politics. He turned, and the vulnerability in his eyes made her breath catch. But I need you to understand what that means, Cecily. You'll be bound to Greymore, to me, and to a life that will never be safe or simple or easy. You'll face challenges from packs who don't accept human leadership. You'll navigate bond complications that will get worse before they get better. And you'll be partnered to a man who's still learning how to trust himself, let alone anyone else. She moved closer, reading the fear beneath his words. You think I'll regret staying? I think you deserve more than a half-broken alpha and a house full of traumatized shifters. That's not your choice to make. She stopped in front of him, close enough to touch but not touching. I chose this position, Ambrose. I chose you. Not because I'm trapped or desperate or too bonded to leave. I chose this because I'm good at it. Because I like solving problems that actually matter. And because partnership with you feels more real than anything I've ever done, she paused. And because somewhere between invoice patterns and protective shifts, I stopped seeing you as a means to an end and started seeing you as what? His voice was rough. As mine. The word came out fierce, possessive. The bond goes both ways. You feel protective of me? I feel the same about you. You want to claim me? I've already claimed you. She stepped closer, her hands rising to frame his face. So stop giving me exit strategies and start trusting that I know what I want. His breath shuddered out. And what do you want, Cecily? You. She pulled him down until their foreheads touched. All of you. The wolf and the man. The alpha and the broken parts you think you need to hide. And I want the partnership we're building and the life we're going to create and every complicated, difficult, beautiful moment that comes with it. You're sure? Not a question, a plea. I've never been more sure of anything. She kissed him, soft this time, deliberate, a promise rather than desperation. I love you, Ambrose, and I'm not going anywhere. The words hung between them for one suspended moment. Then he made a sound that was half laugh, half growl, and pulled her flush against him. Say it again. I love you. Again. His mouth found her jaw, her throat, the sensitive spot below her ear that made her gasp. I love you. Her fingers tangled in his hair. I love you, and I'm staying, and you're going to have to accept that I'm... He kissed her before she could finish, deep and claiming and absolutely devastating. His hand slid down her back, gripped her waist, lifted her until she had to wrap her legs around him or fall. She didn't fall, just held on as he turned, pressed her against the bookshelf, kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. My rooms, he said against her mouth. Now, unless you want our first time to be against library furniture. Heat flooded through her, Your rooms. Yes. He carried her, actually carried her, through corridors she barely registered, into a suite she'd never seen, and set her down beside the largest bed she'd ever encountered. Moonlight streamed through tall windows. Candles burned low on the mantel, and Ambrose looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Last chance, he said quietly. We do this, and the bond will solidify completely. You'll feel everything I feel. I'll feel everything you feel. There's no going back from that kind of intimacy. She reached for the buttons of her gown. Good. His eyes flashed gold. Cecily, I want the bond, Ambrose. I want you. All of you. She held his gaze as she worked the first button free. So stop talking and help me with this corset. He moved. Later, much later, Cecily lay in Ambrose's bed with his arm heavy across her waist, his breath steady against her neck, and the bond humming contentedly in her chest. The intimacy had been everything she'd wanted. Intense, claiming, and absolutely mutual. He'd been demanding but attentive, possessive but careful, wolf and man both present in every touch. And when they'd finally collapsed together, breathless and bonded more thoroughly than any ritual could manage, he'd pulled her close and whispered her name like a prayer. Now, in the quiet aftermath, she traced patterns on his forearm and tried to process the enormity of what had just changed. I can feel you thinking. His voice was sleep-rough. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. He paused, searching for the right words. I spent so long trying to fix things, to hold my family together after my father died, to keep creditors at bay and maintain respectability and make sure Louisa had opportunities I didn't. She turned in his arms to face him. And now I'm here, co-leading a pack, bonded to an alpha, choosing a life I never imagined wanting. It feels too good, like I'm waiting for it to fall apart. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. It won't fall apart. I won't let it. We won't let it. He paused. But it will be hard sometimes. Council politics are brutal. Pack challenges will come, and the bond will have moments where it's overwhelming rather than comforting. I know. And you still want this. I still want this. She kissed him softly. I want the hard parts and the good parts and everything in between. I want to build something that matters, and I want to do it with you. His smile was devastating, all warmth and relief and something deeper. Then we start tomorrow, properly. You'll meet with the pack leaders who didn't attend tonight's council session. We'll establish your authority, set boundaries, make it clear that co-leadership means equal standing. And if they challenge me? Then I'll stand behind you while you prove why I chose you as my mate. His eyes glinted with unmistakable pride. You took down Alaric with pattern recognition and strategic deception. Pack leaders aren't going to intimidate you. She laughed. The sound surprised and genuine. You have entirely too much faith in me. I have exactly the right amount of faith in you. He pulled her closer, his voice dropping to that rough rumble that made heat pool low in her stomach. You're brilliant, brave, and ruthless when necessary. You're everything I didn't know I needed. And if anyone suggests otherwise... His mouth found her throat. I'll remind them that you walked into a werewolf's den, blackmailed your way into a marriage, exposed a conspiracy, and claimed an alpha who'd spent 12 years refusing to be claimed. I did do that, didn't I? She tilted her head, giving him better access. You did. His teeth grazed her pulse point, not breaking skin, on but definitely marking. And now you're mine, completely, irrevocably. Do you understand what that means to a wolf, Cecily? Tell me. It means I will defend you against anyone who threatens you. I will honor your choices even when they terrify me. I will share power, share purpose, share everything I am and everything I have. He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. And it means I will love you for the rest of my life, however long or short that may be. Her breath caught. Ambrose, I love you. The words came easier this time. I think I've loved you since you stood in that estate office and called me out for lying about the disappearances. Since you refused to be intimidated. Since you looked at the wolf and didn't run. His hand slid into her hair. You're my mate, my partner, my equal. When I'm never letting you go. Tears pricked her eyes, the good kind. the kind that came from being seen and chosen and loved without reservation. Good, because I'm never leaving. He kissed her again, and the bond flared between them, bright and strong and utterly complete. The next 3 months transformed Graymore from a sealed estate into a functioning pack territory. Cecily met with council representatives, negotiated territory agreements, and established protocols for human-shifter interaction that other packs began adopting. She worked alongside Ambrose to restructure pack governance, created oversight systems to prevent another Alaric situation, and personally oversaw the rehabilitation of the 4 enhanced subjects Dr. Hargreaves had helped free. Louisa stayed at Graymore, working with Dr. Hargreaves to document the silver bonding process and develop ethical guidelines for future research. The work was slow, painful, and necessary, turning Alaric's weapon development into legitimate medical advancement that could help contaminated shifters without sacrificing human lives. Gideon became Cecily's most valuable ally, teaching her pack hierarchy, introducing her to resistant leaders, and standing beside her when challenges inevitably came. He never quite became warm, but the respect was mutual and bone deep. Mrs. Dalloway transformed from hostile gatekeeper to fierce protector, managing Graymore's household with the same precision she'd once used to hide its secrets, but now in service of transparency rather than concealment. And Ambrose stepped into leadership like he'd been born for it, balancing strength with strategy, dominance with wisdom. The council's quarterly reviews became formalities. Pack challenges stopped entirely once visiting alphas saw how he and Cecily operated together. She'd worried the bond would feel like chains. Instead, it felt like freedom. The freedom to be completely herself, to use her skills without apology, to partner with someone who valued her mind as much as her presence. Tonight, they stood on Graymore's terrace, watching the full moon rise over the moors, the same moors where Louisa had disappeared, where Cecily's desperate search had begun. "Do you ever regret it?" Ambrose asked quietly, "giving up a normal life for this?" Cecily leaned back against him, his arms coming around her waist automatically. "Never." "Do you regret choosing a human mate?" "Never." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Though I'm fairly certain you're more terrifying than most shifters I know," she laughed. "Good. Keeps you honest. Keeps me humble." His voice turned serious. "The council wants us to attend the summit next month, present our co-leadership model formally. There will be challenges, political and probably physical. Pack leaders who think humans have no place in shifter governance. Let them challenge." Cecily turned in his arms, meeting his gaze directly. "We've built something real here, Ambrose. Something that works, and if other packs can't see the value in that, then we'll show them." His smile was all teeth. Together, she agreed. The bond pulsed between them, steady, strong, unbreakable. Not chains, not even tethers. Just connection, partnership, choice. She'd come to Graymore hunting for her sister, and she'd found a family instead. Found purpose, found love, found herself in the process. Ambrose's hand slid to her jaw, tilting her face up. "What are you thinking about?" "How grateful I am that you locked me in that room on our wedding night instead of letting me run." His laugh was low and warm. "I was terrified you'd climb out the window anyway. I considered it." "What stopped you?" "Curiosity." She smiled. "I wanted to know what kind of monster you really were. And now that you know, now I know you're not a monster at all." She kissed him softly. "You're just mine." "Yours," he agreed against her mouth, "always." The moon rose higher. The moors stretched dark and beautiful below, and Cecily stood wrapped in her mate's arms, feeling the bond hum with contentment, and knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Not because fate had decreed it, but because she'd chosen it. Chosen him. Chosen this life, this partnership, this love. And she would choose it again every single day for the rest of her life. 6 months later, the summit hall was packed with alphas from across 3 territories, all of them watching as Cecily presented Graymore's updated governance model to the Council of Elders. Charts showing decreased rogue activity, testimony from rehabilitated contamination patients, financial records proving increased pack stability under joint leadership. She could feel their skepticism, the weight of tradition and prejudice pressing down on every word she spoke. could feel Ambrose standing behind her, silent support and barely restrained dominance both, and ready to defend her authority if necessary. She didn't need him to. The question isn't whether humans can lead alongside shifters, she said, addressing Elder Rosewood directly. The question is whether this council will adapt to changing realities or cling to systems that enable conspiracies like Lord Alaric's. She paused, letting the words land. Greymore nearly fell because one wolf had unchecked authority and no oversight. Joint leadership prevented that. Diverse perspectives caught what homogeneous thinking missed. And partnership, real partnership, created accountability that saved lives. Elder Rosewood's expression was unreadable. And if other packs adopt this model, if humans begin demanding equal standing in pack governance across all territories, then shifter society will be stronger for it. Cecily held the elder's gaze. Or it will fracture under the weight of its own resistance to change. Your choice. A ripple of reaction moved through the hall. Shock, anger, grudging respect. Then Elder Rosewood smiled. The council recognizes Greymore's joint leadership model as legitimate and replicable. Other packs may petition for similar structures, subject to council approval and oversight. She stood, her voice carrying through the hall. Lady Winterbourne, you've proven that strength comes in many forms. The council honors your service. The formal acknowledgement sent another ripple through the assembled alphas. Some looked outraged, others thoughtful. A few, the younger ones, the ones who'd seen their own packs struggle with outdated hierarchies, looked genuinely interested. Cecily stepped back from the podium and returned to Ambrose's side. His hand found hers immediately, fingers lacing together. Terrifying, he murmured in her ear. Absolutely terrifying. You love it. I love you. He pressed a kiss to her temple, not caring who saw. My brilliant, ruthless, perfect mate. Later, after the summit ended and they returned to their rooms, Ambrose pulled her close and asked the question he'd been holding back all evening. Are you happy? Cecily looked up at him, this man who'd started as a desperate bargain and become everything she hadn't known she needed. This partnership that had begun in deception and grown into something unshakable. I'm happy, she said simply. Are you? Happier than I ever thought possible. His arms tightened around her. You changed everything, Cecily. My life, my purpose, and my understanding of what leadership could be. We changed it together. Together, he agreed. And in the quiet of their rooms, with the bond humming contentedly between them and the future stretching bright and uncertain ahead, they held each other and knew that whatever challenges came next, they would face them the same way they'd faced everything since that first desperate bargain. As partners, as equals, as mates who'd chosen each other not because fate demanded it, but because they'd looked at all the complications and dangers and impossibilities and chosen love anyway. Outside, the moon rose over territories that were slowly, painfully learning that strength came in many forms. Inside, two people who'd found each other in darkness built a future together in the light. And it was enough, more than enough. It was everything.